Hi and welcome to BoxingBrains Boxing News. This is the first episode I'll be doing, and for this week I'll be looking at this weekend's action between Adrian Broner and Paulie Malignaggi, and I'll also be looking ahead to this weekend's fight where there'll be Frankie Gavin versus Denton Vassell, Anthony Crolla versus Gavin Rees, and finally Gennady Golovkin versus Matthew Macklin. So plenty of British action to sum up this weekend. There's also a bit of news as well that I'll be looking at, such as Canelo versus Mayweather. The press conference tour now has started. It's kicked off in New York a couple of days ago, and also be looking at potential fights that could be happening later this year. They include Danny Garcia's Zab Judah. A rematch has been talked about, although nothing confirmed yet. And obviously a couple more fights already being mentioned in boxing will happen, especially Britain. Obviously a couple announced this week. Ricky Burns versus Raimundo Beltran, and Nathan Cleverly will take on Kovalev. Obviously an anticipated fight there, so be looking at all of them. But first of all, I want to look at just the weekend gone, where Adrian Broner won by split decision against Paulie Malignaggi. It was a tough fight to call. It was a tough fight, really tough fight to score. I scored it 116-112 for Adrian Broner, so I had it different to some people. Some people had it, not many people had it wider than that. 117-111 or 117-112 was probably a scorecard that some people had. A lot of people had it a lot closer, like 115-113. So it was one of those hard fights to score. You was scoring between a fighter that was coming forward a lot and a fighter that was throwing less punches in Broner and basically just powerful shots, kind of the 1-2s, maybe the occasional one single punch that would land, but wasn't doing much else. Defence was good from Broner, blocked a lot of Paulie's shots, but Paulie obviously throwed a lot more punches, probably probably 100 more punches, or probably more. I haven't seen the stats, but I know he threw a hell of a lot more punches. Obviously his connect rate was a lot lower. A lot of punches obviously blocked by Broner, and those that did get through, obviously as people have said, the effective punching, and really there wasn't as much effective punching from Paulie. But Broner, obviously many of his shots, although never looked like getting a knockout, he landed some solid shots, and if it hadn't been for Paulie's chin, then you'd probably expected Broner would have got the stoppage rather than Broner not having the power at the higher weight class. So, but that's the way that fight went. And my personal reviewers say I thought Broner won. I wrote in my article today that I think a lot of criticism towards Adrian Broner is mainly to do with a personal level. A lot of people don't like Adrian Broner, and although I'm a small fan of Adrian, I can't blame people for having a dislike towards him. He's, not the not the most likable of characters. Things he says outside the ring have been taken into account by a lot of fans and obviously judged through that. And at the same time, a lot of things he does inside the ring against Paulie Malignaggi again. He did a lot of cheap tactics, a couple of low blows in there, a couple of times he did stupid moves that you just don't see in boxing. It was hard for the referee to control, although he didn't do himself justice with the way he did referee the fight. So when you look at it that way, you got to say that there's a huge reason why he's not the most liked of fighters, and why people sometimes judge him by his character rather than his fighting ability. So I felt really some of the criticism was more on a personal level, where if you're like reviewing a fight and if you're talking about a fight, you've got to leave out that personal level. You've got to just focus on what happened in the ring, and I don't think not everybody did exactly that. They're more focused on his out of the ring antics, or sometimes in the ring antics, and I think that somehow clouded a few people's judgments as to how they rated him in the fight. Obviously a lot of people know the talk as well. Sometimes a fighter will say he's going to do this in the ring, but you got to kind of ignore what he says he's going to do, because a lot of the time you know, it's called trash talk for a reason. You know, they talk a load of crap, and a lot of time that's what it is, because they're not exactly going to do exactly what they say in the press conference. They say they're going to knock each other out usually means, you know, well, I'll see if I can get a knockout. No fighter should go into the ring looking for the knockout. And that's what Adrian Broner did. And at the end of the day, I think he got the job done, fair and square. Okay, got the right decision, but obviously, I'd say a step up in his opposition, but you gotta give credit to Paulie. He's a top fighter. He's not a world champion for nothing. But obviously there are better fighters out there. There are better fighters that don't hold a world title. You probably look at Madonna's obviously one that people are talking about a lot. Matisse back at light welterweight, especially if the Garcia fight doesn't go ahead. Then you got to look at other fighters: Victor Ortiz, Andre Berto, Robert Guerrero are all top fighters you could take on. Other fighters at the higher weight class like Trout or Lara, but obviously it's more likely he's either going to drop down to the 140-pound division at light welterweight or stick at the welterweight division. It depends obviously how he feels about getting down back in weight, which I'm sure he could be able to do. Although people said how big he was before the fight, I think we all realised that he wasn't that big or strong, at least at the higher weight class, as it seemed at first. So that's obviously next step for him. Malignaggi, he's just got to see where he goes. He can talk himself. He's got a record to be looked at. You know, people look at his record and look at the people he's taken on. He's gone a 12-round distance with a prime Miguel Cotto. He's fought other top fighters. You know, he's obviously other defeats were two other defeats were to Ricky Hatton and Amir Khan, who both stopped him late on. And you look at obviously several other fighters that he's fought. You know, when he went to Ukraine and beat Senchenko just a couple, 2 years back, was obviously a big surprise to a lot of people. So again, he's got a good resume that people would want Paulie's name on their record, which would do a lot for them. So really, truthfully, that's still plenty of fights out there. Again, you look at kind of the same names that I said about Broner fighting. You look at Berto, Ortiz, Guerrero, all kind of bounce back fights. You even look at other world champions like Alexander, Timothy Bradley, obviously top rank. Golden Boy might, you know, stutter that from happening, but still, obviously, we've seen Golden Boy and top rank work together before, so maybe again that could happen. So I say again for Broner, there's the other champions like Bradley and so on. Obviously Alexander as well. Broner versus Alexander would be a very good fight, very makeable. With Darren Alexander also being with Golden Boy and also one of the up-and-coming fighters, very similar style to Malignaggi. Probably faster as well, and probably does throw a few more punches. And obviously definitely a better reach advantage than Malignaggi had. So that could all come into effect in a Broner fight. It would make it very intriguing. So now we've finished talking about that, we want to go on to this weekend's action. That includes, first of all, Frankie Gavin versus Denton Vassell, which takes place this Friday on Boxing Nation in the UK. So over here it'll be about 8 o'clock over in Britain starting time, so probably main event you're talking about 10 o'clock, half 10, 11 o'clock, which you're talking in America, what, 5, 6 o'clock Eastern time. So that's what time that is expected to be on. So really that's a tough fight, that's a real 50-50 fight. I'm a fan of both of them. Both very good fighters, both got a lot of talent. I saw Frankie Gavin live earlier this year, and what impressed me most was how fast he was. You always see him obviously, and he looks very strong fighter, especially at the weight. He looks quite big, technically sound, jab's good, right hand's good. Every punch he throws is systematic and simple, and everything seems so effective. But his speed is actually something that can surprise you when you see him live. How quick he is with counter shots, how quick he is to move out the way of punches, and looked very impressive last time against Jason Welborn, which is a fight I saw. And obviously Denton Vassell, you know, one of those creeps under the radar a little bit. Not really talked about in the early part of his career. He just did everything, got on with it, and it's since just kind of creeped up the rankings and now got himself as Commonwealth champion. Great performance against Ronnie Heffron that got him to this stage. I'm just typing him in now to have a look at his record. Denton Vassell, that is. As I say, he's 5'8", and coming off, say, we know about Heffron, but that was how long ago is that? That's like 8 months ago, yeah. November last year he last fought, so 8 months since he was last in the ring. Obviously look at opponents before that, generally kind of more mandatory challenges. For his Commonwealth title, he's just took on and beaten a lad here, Ushona, that he beat, who was 23-0 coming in. Beat Lee Purdy on points. So really, as I say, he's done what he's had to do. He's beaten the fighters that have been put in front of him and done well to do that. And now obviously a step up for him to fight Frankie Gavin, just as it's a step up for Frankie Gavin to fight Vassell. So again, he's got a 2-inch height advantage as Frankie's obviously southpaw, so the awkwardness of that. But obviously he's fought a lot of top fighters. You know, you go back to Michael Lomax, who was the once prize fighter winner, Young Mutley. You know, a very experienced veteran. Obviously been in a lot of fights. That was an awkward fight for him, in which he won on points. Curtis Woodhouse was his toughest fight of his career. Obviously, that was before Frankie really started to get dedicated with boxing. And then obviously wins over Junior Witter and Jason Welborn. Probably the most impressive his recent wins. And now obviously stepping in with somebody of the quality of Vassell. It's quite a step up for him. So I think keys to victory for Vassell would be to say put pressure on Frankie, but sensible pressure. You don't want to be. I think you saw in the Welborn fight he had successes. Welborn when he dived on Frankie, but obviously at the same time he was getting counter-punched, maybe a bit too slow and a bit too naive in his attacks. So really he's got to be calculated with his attacks. So almost coming with the jab, try and outwork Gavin. Sometimes he can be outworked, so that's going to be a key. At the same time, he's just got to not get sloppy and caught with counters, you know, because Gavin's a very good boxer. Not really a fighter himself, more of a boxer, so he'd be more. It's more likely that Vassell will take the front foot in the fight, so closing the gap and not allowing Frankie to throw a punch and then move away. Wants to keep him kind of trapped, keep him on the ropes, keep him in one spot at a time, so and then you can throw the punches, and then he needs to move himself, so move off to one side or the other, move backwards, let Frankie come forward, and then push back onto him. So like kind of like measured, but attacks, but not too like erratic. Don't like throwing hooks, and don't get wild on the inside or especially the outside. You know, let your hands go a bit on the inside, but when you're on the outside against Frankie Gavin, a good counter puncher, you don't want to be letting your hands go too much from out there. So you want then simple, straight shots, and that could obviously be key to him winning the fight. As for Frankie, I think he comes in definitely the favourite. So it's more of Frankie, do what you've been doing in your previous fights. Sometimes, not all the time, but most of the time, wait for Vassell to throw his punches. If he does that all the time now, like every single round, then obviously there's a chance that he's just going to get overwhelmed, he's going to get outworked, and he's not going to be getting off with his own shots. And don't want to get into that phase of not doing much at all. So he wants to be constantly kind of throwing punches himself, and movement's going to be key. Keep moving, moving left to right, switching with different kind of shots. At times like go with a left, straight left. Other times with a obviously right jab. So I say sometimes lead on the left, kind of give different kind of scenarios, kind of thing, if you know what I mean, for Vassell, rather than just giving him the same punch to lead off every single time. And I think if he does that, he will get the win. If he kind of fights his fight and doesn't let Vassell outwork him or get to him too much, just stays on the outside enough at a time to be able to dominate from the outside, would be key for him. I don't think there'll be a stoppage here. I don't think either of them have got huge power. Obviously, Frankie can dig to the body quite a bit, as he proved again in his last fight, but I think both have got solid chins. I think both will have enough respect for each other not to go for any kind of knockouts in any of the rounds. So I think the pick is, I'm not going to make a pick. I've put my cases out for both fighters. Both fighters have the ability to beat each other, so I'm going to say that I'm not going to make a pick on who's going to win. It's a 50-50 fight, and both fighters have the ability to win the fight. Each fighter has obviously the ability to lose the fight as much as win it, so that's how I'm going to leave it. So that's pretty much a preview, no prediction for that one. So then on to the next of the fights, and that's Anthony Crolla versus Gavin Rees. I think this one again is just really about, it's more about Rees. Rees has got obviously the talent to bounce back from the Adrian Broner defeat. So it's all about Crolla comes in quite fast, can leave himself open at times, but obviously likes to box. It depends on the opponent sometimes with Crolla. Against the Derry Matthews, he didn't want to get involved at too many occasions he got involved in a fight, so I expect Gavin Rees to come on strong in the second half of the fight and finish well. And I think Gavin Rees can get a stoppage in the last 2 or 3 rounds of the fight. So for the final preview, and that's Gennady Golovkin, or Triple G, to obviously Triple G, and Matthew Macklin. So, and then another British fighter in the ring, again Matthew Macklin, getting a shot at a world title. Obviously had a few unfouled attempts, was unlucky against Felix Sturm. I thought he'd won that fight, or at least should have got a draw. And then I thought he did well against a very good Sergio Martinez, probably one of the last of his best performances from Martinez. So that fight come at the wrong time for him. I thought the Murray fight, on the other hand, against Martinez, come at the right time for Martin Murray. So I think Macklin's a massive step up for Golovkin. I don't think he's fought that many he hasn't really fought any top class fighters. You look at his last few opponents. Ishida was just made for him in the way he fights. So was Rosado. So this is going to be different. He's going in with somebody now, I think, that believes he can win. He's going with somebody who's going to have a real good tactic to be able to box. But I still think that Golovkin is on the rise, and I think Gennady Golovkin will win. I don't think he'll get the stoppage. I think Macklin's clever enough and to not get hit on too many occasions with solid punches, but at the same time, I think he'll come over, get to Macklin down the stretch, and probably in about after the 10th round onwards, it will kind of be a bit of a survival mission for Macklin to get through the final few rounds and see the final bell, where I think Golovkin will be awarded with a decision win. So that's it for my previews. So you'll also be able to see full previews of all of these fights on my blog, which is boxingbrains.blogspot.co.uk, or you can just go onto my Twitter account, which is @BoxingBrains, and all my articles and all my blogs will be up on there for you to see and read and comment at any time. So if you've got any questions for my next episode, this is episode 1, I'll be back on next week, where I'll be obviously reviewing this weekend's fights and previewing the week after's fights and looking at some news. So if you've got any questions, just leave them in the comments at the bottom. I'll be answering them as well as best I can. So just for a quick snippet of the news, I've realised I've been going on for quite a bit now. Didn't realise it'd be that long, but it's all these previews and it's all this Adrian Broner. It makes you talk for hours. So I'm going to have a quick look at the news, and that's one of the main headlines this week has been Danny Garcia, will he be fighting Lucas Matisse, or will this rematch with Zab Judah go ahead? Obviously the fingers crossed are that the Zab Judah rematch won't go ahead. It's not that we don't want to see it. It was quite a good fight. It was enjoyable, but in the weight division that Danny Garcia is in like welterweight slash welterweight division, there's so many top fights out there that you just want to see him fighting the top fighters rather than going on and having rematches with a fighter like Zab Judah when obviously everybody wants to see him fight Lucas Matisse. And obviously if he doesn't take the fight with Matisse, then obviously there's going to be a cause of he's running scared of Matisse, and in all honesty there's no other reason, there's no other explanation of why he wouldn't take take a fight with Matisse when he's already proven against Zab Judah he's the better fighter. Apart from probably the last 4 or 5 rounds, most of the fight belonged to Danny Garcia. It was only after that round where he scored a knockdown that Danny Garcia's performance slipped a little bit, which might have been to do with stamina. But anyway, we don't want to see that rematch again. Boxing fans are not calling for a rematch. You get so many fights where fans are calling for a rematch and I want to see it happen again because it's a controversial decision or whatever, and we never seem to get them. So sadly, when we don't want a rematch, we seem to get it, and that could be the case here, but we'll have to see. Fingers crossed for all boxing fans that we get the fight. That when I did that review on the boxing wish list of what fight fans want to see next as the main fight, pretty much half the people said, more than half the people said Lucas Matisse, Danny Garcia. So obviously, as I say, that's the fight that all boxing fans want to see, and I think it's about time that boxing fans started to get the fight that we wanted to see. So sorry about the other news with Beltran will be taking on Ricky Burns and Nathan Cleverly will be taking on Kovalev. So those are 2 fights that will be happening later this year. I can't remember the Nathan Cleverly date. Probably be October, I think, sometime. And September the 7th is the date for Ricky Burns' next WBO title defence. So just want to thank you again for listening and thank you for tuning in. So I will be back next week. Don't know about the same day. It'll probably be about Wednesday that I'll do the review. But as I say, in the meantime, if you want to go on to boxingbrains.blogspot.co.uk, you can see all my reviews, all my articles on the latest boxing news, and obviously the latest previews and reviews of the boxing. And also follow me on Twitter at BoxingBrains, where again you'll get all my personal views, all my articles, and that will be on there as well, and all my news on all sports, all my tweets and whatever, so you can see them all on there. So once again, thank you for listening, and also for anybody interested in NBA, I will be previewing next season on the NBA on YouTube, probably next week again. I'll be looking at different teams' chances, who's the best, most likely to be in the hunt for the NBA Finals or in the NBA playoffs next season. So I'll be looking at that. I'll also be writing a review probably next week again on this season's NBA. So once again, thank you all for listening and thank you for tuning in. I'll see you guys soon.